Hi, and welcome to this short introduction to the program Leading with Dignity. Joining me to talk about the program is Donna Hicks, who will be presenting. So welcome, Donna. Maybe I can ask you the first question, which is just, could you give us a brief overview of the program?
Sure, Paul. The program is designed to help people in organizations, in leadership positions, who are struggling with maybe some relationships with their employees, or have some difficult issues that they're having trouble resolving, some conflicts. The whole idea is to try to introduce what I call a missing link in our understanding of conflict. And that's this whole idea of creating an environment where people's dignity is being honored. And I think anyone in leadership positions could benefit enormously from this, because it really lays out what I think is a kind of human dimension to how to create a culture in organizations that brings out the best in people.
Who are the types of people that are going to benefit mainly from the program?
Well, I think anyone in a leadership position could benefit from this. In addition, I think people who actually do consultants, people who work in organizations to try to improve culture, to try to establish good, strong, healthy working relationships with their employees, and not just their employees, with everyone in their system. So anybody interested in elevating their consciousness about the role dignity plays in the well-being of people and organizations.
Okay, and I guess there are anybody that's involved in sort of the diversity and inclusion agenda, maybe, and anybody involved in culture change programs.
That's true. And in fact, I have a lot of colleagues here in the US who are working on DEI programs, workshops, and instead of labeling them diversity, equity, inclusion, they're calling them dignity, equity, inclusion. Once we understand all of our differences and our different ways of being in the world, our lived experiences, once we understand that, we have to bring us all back together again. And dignity is that unifying factor.
And could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What made you want to work on this program?
It took me almost a decade to write my first book, Dignity, Its Essential Role in Resolving Conflict. And once that book came out, I was featuring in that book the role dignity plays and how we have to address these dignity concerns with people before we can do any problem solving around getting a peace agreement. Once that came out, people in the corporate world were fascinated by this concept that maybe inside their organizations, if they were having conflicts, it might be about dignity, and it might be about people feeling like their dignity has not been honored. So that's when I took this foray into the corporate world and found out, sure enough, that this human dimension, this desire for dignity, which I think is universal, shows up in the corporate world just as much as it shows up in international conflicts.
Give us a bit of an introduction overview of the modules in the program.
Yeah, the first module is going to be just about introducing the dignity model and sharing the building blocks, what I think are the essential building blocks in understanding how to apply it to your leadership style and repertoire. And we'll create the definition of dignity, what it is and what it isn't. And I'll introduce very practical ways of recognizing times in which your people or yourself, you feel like your dignity has been violated. And essentially, this first is introducing the idea of dignity consciousness and the learning, the knowledge that's required. The second one is focusing on the evolutionary roots of dignity. It turns out we, as a human species, have evolved these mechanisms that get us into big trouble with other people. And if we don't understand those first, we're never going to create a culture of dignity. And so we will go through what the influence of that is on our ability to honor dignity. And the third module is really understanding the impact of the ignorance surrounding this dignity issue. What is the impact on organizations when leadership doesn't really understand this? And what is the impact in a positive sense when people do understand dignity and do integrate it into their leadership repertoire, and the culture and the effects that learning about dignity and applying dignity consciousness to your organization, it's profound. Fourth is that we're going to figure out how to be very skillful with the dignity and with the dignity knowledge. It's not just you have something in your head that you understand about dignity, but we're going to try to put it into practice by practicing how to give and receive feedback, for example, or how to acknowledge someone who has been violated, and how to speak up even when you have your dignity violated. And the fifth, trust building. And no matter where I go in the corporate world, every leadership team is interested in how to establish trust. So we're going to elaborate on that, spend time practicing that. Sixth module is in healing and reconciling relationships in conflict. What does that look like? The seventh is the systemic or structural indignities in an organization, addressing those. What does that look like? And how do we start approaching that? And what kind of policy changes need to happen that will address these systemic indignities? The eighth is, how do you go about introducing this? Let's say you want to apply this to your organization. What do you have to do? What are the steps in bringing this knowledge into your organization? And ninth is looking at the challenges, because there are going to be challenges to applying this, the challenges and opportunities for creating a culture of dignity. And the whole idea is not to just leave this at the workplace, but the opportunity here is to really affect changes in all of your relationships, starting with your family, yourself even. And finally, the last session will be wrapping everything up, trying to bring everything together, to everything that we've learned in the previous modules. How can we integrate all this into a package that people can take back to work with them or back home with them and think about applying it in their world?
Okay, great. And what are the key things you want people to get out of the program?
To develop this, what I call dignity consciousness, which is the awareness of the impact that you have on other people, and how you can either make somebody's day or you can break somebody's day. So what does that all entail? And that's the big takeaway.
So just to summarize, I think the key thing is, lots of organizations are dealing with conflicts of one kind or another. Lots of organizations recognize they've got cultural issues to deal with and are trying to bring about culture change within the organizations. But a lot of organizations are struggling to work out what that actually really means and how to go about it in practice. So dignity, leading with dignity and dignity consciousness, as far as you're concerned, sort of central to bringing about sustainable change, lasting change, in because lasting change only comes by improving and developing better relationships within the organization and between the organization and its other stakeholders, I guess. Is that a good summary of?
That's great.